Hello, and welcome to a part two of last week's Profiles of Endurance. I'm Father Scott Vanderveer. 91-year-old Joan Spelter was crippled in her 20s by an emotional disorder that almost made it impossible for her to function. Through her faith, recovery, and hard work, she fought her way back, and that has served her well throughout all of the decades of her life. Last week, we heard about her journey with the recovery program, but also we found out that her husband, the father of her 5 children, wound up dealing with a terminal illness and dying at age 48, leaving her as a young widow with 5 teenagers at home. What did she do next? You won't believe where this story goes. So settle back and listen as Joan shares with us how faith and recovery and hard work brought her a life beyond her wildest dreams. We pick up with her just as her husband is going through the trials of his health that are leading to his ultimate death at age 48, and about how settling in Schenectady after spending all of her early years in New York City provided a brand new chapter of life for her and her family.
The kids were in a great school. I loved the school. I loved everything about it. I really loved the community here. And I, of course, loved the house,
Yeah.
And so we were it was a blessing. And everything went along fine for about maybe 2 years or so. And then Bill was working. Of course, he's traveling. He's going every day. Went away for a week and then be home on the weekend. Then he'd go away for another week and then be home on the weekend. Then he'd be home a week. Then he'd use the same cycle. So we didn't see a lot of him. He wasn't really here a lot. But anyway, everything worked out. Now, we had no car. He had to learn how to drive.
Wow.
Which he did. And he finally got a car from the company, but he had to use the car. And then I finally learned how to drive, but that took a while. But it took a while for us to get a car, We just didn't have the money, we couldn't do it. And I used to walk up to the Price Chop or the A&P at that time with my little shopping cart, and get my food. But anyway, we managed, and everything went really well. And but then he started getting sick. Then he had a slip disc and had surgery. Then he got over that, and then he had cancer of the kidney, and he had to have that removed. Then he slipped and fell across the street and cracked his head, was knocked unconscious, and that was Christmas Eve. He spent Christmas Eve in the hospital, came home Christmas Day, and then 5 months later had a grand mal seizure. And then, it just went like that. These are a few years in between with everything. But then it got to the point where he had a pain in his leg. And when they got examined, he had cancer of the bone.
Oh.
So that was the beginning of the end, And he died at the age of 48. He was very young.
And your children at that point were ranging in age. They were, your oldest girls were teenagers.
Yeah, I had 5 teenagers then.
They were all,
yeah.
Oh my, Joan. Yeah. So Joan,
the
let's just.
Boys were young. They were 13 and 14, yeah.
Let's pause a moment and say, you were going to recovery meetings all through this.
All
yes.
the time. And I was then area leader for the whole area up here. That's when we moved to Schenectady in 68. I became area leader. So, we had 2 other groups that were running besides mine. Then we added on several more. So in the end, we had about 7 groups up here, and it was very good. We had a good support network. It was very helpful. And so those groups, we had leaders meetings once a month, and they were very, very good, And so anyway, that was a big help to me at that time. I couldn't have gotten through without recovery, that's for sure. And my faith. At that time, I didn't tell you this, in 1972, I joined the Charismatic Renewal. And I was baptized in the Holy Spirit. And I had the joy of the Spirit. And I did have, even during his illness, I remember praising the Lord. Every time I'd hear a bad a message from the doctor, I start praising him. Thank you, Jesus. Praise you, Jesus. And I began to get this tremendous peace. And so did Bill.
Yes.
So we both went through his last illness with this tremendous peace. And even up till the night he died, when I went to the hospital, we were there with the family, and then I went back in the evening. And when I was going to leave, my last words to him, he was falling into a coma. He had pneumonia, and he had been great during the day, so we never expected him to die. But anyway, my friend was going to stay with him from our prayer group. He was a deacon in the Protestant church, and he was a wonderful man. So he was staying there praying with Bill, and I had to go home with the kids. I had all the kids. And so I said to Bill, I got to go now. I said, I called him, Bill, and he didn't answer. I kept calling Bill. And finally he said, yes. I said, keep praising the Lord. He said, I am. And that was the last words I had with him.
Wow. He died in faith, in such faith, in such faith.
Yes. See, he had a terrible fear. He never could have anything around his neck. He always had to hold his collar away from his neck. And he was dreading that they'd put anything down his throat, Well, they came to him and they wanted to take out the fluid in his lung because and he fought them off. He wouldn't let them. And then he died. But he needed to, because he was ready to go home to the Lord, He really was ready. He was a saintly man, God bless him, yeah. What he suffered, he did not have a happy life, working all the time, out not with the family, it was very hard,
Joan, you had mentioned to me that he actually gave you a few gifts. He had said a few things to you that helped you with your grief.
Yeah.
What kind of things did he say to help you with your grief before he died?
We talked about him, of course, dying. He used to say to me, there'll be because I was always praying for him to be healed, and we had got together, the family, I'd hold hands, and we'd hold him up to the Lord and everything. And then he said to me, yeah, sure. He said, keep praising the Lord. He said, they'll be carrying me down the aisle, and you'll be saying, oh, look, he's been healed. Praise the Lord.
Yeah.
Always making kind of fun of me,
Yeah.
But then he did say to me, look, when I go, I don't want you thinking about me, because he said, you can't live with the dead. You have to move on. And so after he died, I really had almost a physical reaction from him. I felt that whenever I started to think about him, I sensed that he was taking me by the shoulders and turning me away from him and pushing me away. As if to say, I don't want you here. You don't belong here now. You've got a life of your own. And I truly believed that God had a plan for my life. Wow. And it was to meet somebody else. And I had such joy after he died. And I could have gone into a depression, which would not have been good for me. But instead, I had this tremendous joy in the Lord. I mean, I just felt that God had taken him home. He had no more pain. He was happy in heaven. And now I could move on with my life, too. And I could be a joy about it and know that God had not left me. He was right there with me. And he was leading me now into a new life, Wow. And that's really what helped me tremendously,
It's an amazing strength your faith gave you. I think it's an amazing strength.
It is. It really is. I don't know what I would have done without it,
Now you did have to go through some years alone though, Joan, and the experience of dating with 5 children with middle-aged men, it wasn't always pleasant. You didn't No, it wasn't. Even though you had that joy, you still had to endure a lot of trials.
I did. And I have to say, I wasn't always the best person in the world with these men, I have to admit it. I mean, but I thought everything was just fine. I had honest to God, I went through those 8 years after Bill's death with absolutely no guilt. Yeah. I never felt anything I did was wrong. Yeah. I just felt that God was with me all the time. I had that wonderful feeling. I mean, and I know in a way it might have been my imagination. I hope not. I think God was truly there, guiding me every step of the way. Yeah. Because the way I met my second husband was such a miracle.
Tell
I
us
mean,
about that. It's an amazing story.
oh
Joan,
my
talk
God.
to us
Well,
about
first of
what
all,
started happening.
he was Hungarian, right?
Mm.
He had gone through his own hell on earth. I mean, he had a wife that was schizophrenic. And so he left Hungary with her, and then he lived in Ireland. They took him into Ireland. So he lived as an Irish citizen there for 9 years. And his wife took sick with schizophrenia and was so sick. And there was no chance of him coming to this country as long as she was sick. He ended up getting a Hungarian psychiatrist come to Ireland, to the Red Cross, and she got well on a weekend. She got well.
Wow.
And at that time, the visas opened up to America. Before that, he couldn't have come to America. He was going to go to Canada. So, but when she was well, they would accept them. So they accepted them here, and he went to Chicago because a relative had a place, a business there, and he could get a job, But he had a really miserable life there with her. In the end, she ended up dying in a mental ward, So he had 3 children too, and so anyway, his children had left home. One was in the service, one was, working somewhere else, and they were all adults, and he was looking to meet somebody. And then I was, after dating men and all, I was disgusted. I didn't want to date any more men, but I thought, I was in the rectory, and they had this magazine, St. Anthony's Messenger, and it had an article about recovery in it. Huh. And I remember it had Gene Kelly on the cover, because it was for Ireland or something, with his Irish hat on or something. And I remember thinking, I think I should take out a subscription to that magazine. Now, believe me, I really had no interest in reading that magazine, I have to say. I didn't even know why I did such a thing. But I took out this subscription, right? So the first month I get the magazine, I look through it, and I see they have an ad for Pen Pal Club. So I thought, gee, maybe I ought to join a Pen Pal Club. I wouldn't mind writing to somebody. And if I could find somebody from Chicago, I go to Chicago twice a year for recovery. And I would see them twice a year. That's perfect. I don't want to see anybody any more than that. That's perfect. So anyway, for $3, I joined this thing. Right? So the first month I get it, they list all the people, and they tell you had to put a little blurb in about yourself. So he put in, he was a pastry chef, and he loved to see how God worked in people's lives, and he loved music and camping. And I thought, oh, gee, that sounds like a nice guy. So, and then I do it, but he probably looks like the Pillsbury Doughboy, a pastry chef. But anyway, I wrote to him, right? So then he sends me back a letter, and he sends me a picture. Well, he was this handsome guy, thinking, holy cow. Well, anyway, we started writing, and this went on, it was probably 2 years before we actually got engaged and married. But, during that period, I saw him in Chicago once, and he took me to a dance for recovery, and we got to know each other better. And of course, he was so impressed with recovery dance because he has all these former mental patients having a great time, laughing, having fun. And of course, all he ever saw was the dark side of mental illness, with his wife. So you would have thought he would have ran away from me, never toward me after having a wife with schizophrenia,
Sure.
But that didn't happen. He was like just so enthralled. And another interesting thing happened. When he took me to the airport, the first day we spent together, which was lovely, we had a lovely time, I could not resist this man. I felt this affection for him that was so powerful. I kept kissing him on the cheek. And he even, of course, he was a guy who hadn't been kissing women for a long time.
Yeah.
I don't know how long, because his wife was sick so many years. But anyway, I'm sure it really impressed him a little, like, wow, where is that coming from,
Yeah.
But I just was taken with this guy. So anyway, we kept writing, and then I saw him again another time, and then right after that, we got engaged. And then we didn't know how we were going to get together because his job was in Chicago, right? How's he going to come here? I had a girl in church who worked for this beautiful place, Villa Italia, restaurant. I mean, pastry shop rather.
Yeah.
And I told her about my future husband, and I said I can get the resume if you could bring it there. She said she would. So we made a resume. I made a resume up for him over the phone, and then I gave it to her. She brought it to this guy, the boss, and he had a relative in Chicago.
Huh.
So he told the relative to go to the shop where Henry was and test out his pastries. So he did, and he told the guy, they're fantastic, you know.
Oh.
So he said he would hire him. Now think about all this, you know what I mean?
Miraculous.
Anything could have gone wrong. So now he had a wonderful summer home that he loved dearly, so he had to give that up. And he decided to come, and he came here January 1st, 1984, and we were married January 28th. And when we were married, we had 4 priests on the altar. I mean, it was the priest that married me was like my confessor. I used to go to him and tell him all my troubles, you know. And in fact, he said to me, I was his spiritual wife, you know, because he told me his troubles. So I mean, but Henry had never had this kind of experience. Of course, neither did I. I mean, we stood around the altar while the priest said the mass, and I mean, it was just beautiful.
Wow.
And my kids played music. Joan and Bernadette played the flute. Joan played the guitar and sang. My boys did the readings. I mean, and all my charismatic friends were in the church. So at the end of the mass, we're leaving the church, and we're singing, "This is the day that the Lord has made," right? And we're walking up the aisle, praising the Lord, and nobody left. They all stayed singing, praising the Lord.
Oh.
It was so cute until it was over, right? And then they came up. So that, and then of course we had a wonderful reception with fun and dancing. Oh, it was beautiful. But none of that. That was all a miracle. I mean, anything could have happened that would have kept him and I from how many bazillion things where we wouldn't have met each other, you know?
And it's been 36 years of joy for you.
Oh, it has. It has. This man, I mean, he didn't know much about the church too much. He was 4 years in a Franciscan school when he was from 10 to 14, I think. But after that, he did not have a lot of understanding of the Catholic Church or anything. And he had married outside the church. His wife and him were married in a Protestant church. So he had to kind of get himself back on track, you know, which he did. But what was beautiful about it, from the very beginning, he put himself totally into the church. And I mean, he came with me to mass, charismatic masses. And I mean, he was a part of everything with me, you know.
Wow.
And he started reading and studying the Bible. He had read the Bible through 6 times.
Wow.
And I mean, he has records of books he's read on, you know, Fulton Sheen's books and all kinds of books, but, you know, C.S. Lewis. I mean, he read everything. I mean, he has self-educated himself and the Catechism of the Catholic Church. And I mean, knows that all the way through. He's done that. He's doing it again. He'll do it again, like each time. Wow. He's unbelievable. He's a saint. Saint. Never mean to me, never says an unkind word. I mean, he's just a gift of God to me.
What a blessing.
36 years. I just thank God every day, you know.
Well, so I go back to, this is the woman who at one point at an earlier stage of her life felt absolutely imprisoned by her fears and anxieties. And listen, this is the same lifetime, the same person. Right. All of that joy and courage and willingness to take risks. It's really,
Oh, I didn't tell you I went to school.
This is one of the biggest things. What people so let's start off. When you were raising your family, you had not yet gotten a bachelor's degree. Is that correct?
No, I never went to college. All through until Bill died. When Bill died, I was a teacher's aide, and they gave free courses at the community college. So I went down and took 1 or 2 courses, and I got A's, and they told me, you ought to come in seriously and maybe take a program. So I decided to try it. After Bill died, I thought, well, I'll try it. I get some aid, to school. So I did. So I did so well there, and that was with the grace of God. And that they said, you should transfer to a 4-year college. So I went over to the College of St. Rose and applied, and they said, we'll give you 18 credits toward your schooling here. So I did. But I got a degree. I even was in a class with Joan. She could tell you that story.
Your daughter Joan.
Yes.
Joan took a class. You were. I love it.
And the teacher. One time we had to do a program together, her and I. And I made a joke, and the teacher was a very serious guy, you know. So I told this joke about a slow boat to China or something. I was doing a report on Japan on the factory system or something like that, you know. And so when I did it, Joan said, and I said, I kind of poked the teacher and said, but like when I made the joke, you know, and she said, Joan, Ma, nobody touches Professor Allen. Well, after that, she was scared to death that we wouldn't get A's, you know, but we both got an A for the program. So anyway, I graduated with a bachelor's in sociology, and I went to work at a place. Actually, it was not much, but it was the first start for me, you know. And I was working, and then I got the thought, I heard about this job at the Salvation Army through my girlfriend, and I looked into it, and they said yes, that they would hire me. So at that time, I also had the thought to go back to school for my master's. Now, I was 52 years old now, 52. So I go over to SUNY, and they accept me. They said I can go at night, and it would take 4 years for me to go at night. I said, fine, no problem. Because, see, always remember, I watched if God was leading me. Because if God was leading me, he would open all the doors.
Yes.
They would just open.
Yes.
And I always said to him, if it's not your will, just close the doors. I didn't care, one way or the other. So anyway, the doors just kept opening, you know. And so I got $5,000 from the Salvation Army for my master's degree. I just had to keep a B average. So anyway, I started going to school there, and I went at night, worked during the day. I became head of the social program there at the Salvation Army, and of course they would be bragging about. They liked the fact that I was charismatic, that I was born again. You know, they liked that.
I bet.
They, of course, are a different faith. You know,
yes.
And but you know, I was able to get them so that they didn't have these comic books about the Pope, you know, with stuff they used to put out. I told them I would not put up with that at the place. So they got rid of him, the captain. He really was very good. He was very good. And so we got along fine. And anyway, that's when I married Henry, because I married him in 84. I was working for the Salvation Army and going to school. And then I got my master's in 86. And then I stayed with the Salvation Army till 92. And then I decided to study for my counseling in alcohol counseling, my certification. And I got that.
On top of your master's. So now this is a woman who didn't start until, were you in your 40s when you started your bachelor's?
47.
You started as a 47-year-old woman who'd lost her husband. So a 47-year-old widow with 5 children goes to college. It goes so well, she gets her master's, and then she gets advanced certification in substance abuse.
Right. And so I went to work for an outpatient clinic, and I worked with them up until probably 1998, because what happened was my boss was doing some shady stuff. And we got caught by the Attorney General's office, you know, and he was really going to end up almost in jail. But, you know, he lost a lot of support, like from Medicaid, which was a big part of his income, the Medicaid patients and everything. So I worked for a little while for him part-time. And then I just had to quit because he was going to have to close the business, you know. But thank God, at least my name wasn't hurt through that, you know, because I had everyone that worked for him nervous, you know. But we were okay because it was him that did all the wheeling and dealing, you know. So anyway, I left there then, and then I thought I was finished. I'm done. I'm retired. I'm home. That was 98. And then in 2017, my friend came by one day and said, Joan, why don't you go back to counseling? And I said, "What do you mean back to counseling? I've been retired." "Well, you can get your license back." And he said, told me about Psychology Today, and they could take on they would help me, and they would get me clients and everything, and this easy program. So I looked into it. I had to get 46 credits to get my license back within a year.
Wow.
And so I went to one program, I got 8 credits. Another program, I got 10 credits. Another program, 4. By the end of the year, I had 46 credits, and I got my license back. And so I started then private counseling, and I've been doing it ever since.
Now, and I mean, for anybody who's doing the math, who realized that you were, raising kids in the 60s when you came to Schenectady, you were in your later 80s. When...
Oh, well, I was 89, 88 or 89. Let me see. I'm 91 now. I'll be 91 the end of next month.
Just amazing. Let's just pause again for a moment. Let's pause. That would be amazing if your entire life had been nothing but Easy Street. But it's the same woman.
Oh. And Scott, if you would have asked me before this all started, what kind of a life did you have? I would have said wonderful. Oh, yeah. I've had a wonderful life. Because I feel like that.
Yes.
I have no self-pity or like, oh, poor me, I didn't know, I did. None of that. I just am so joyful that my life is the way it is and the way it's been. I mean, as I said, after my husband died, even before, when I'd be with my children, we would be laughing. Humor was big in our family, It still is. When we get together, it's a lot of laughter. And we would be in the living room watching these great, in those days, there was some good humor on TV, And we would watch some of those crazy shows. Saturday Night Live at that time had Gilda Radner. And, I mean, it was like, everything was so hilarious. We'd be falling over laughing, But we just got along well. I always said in my home, love spoken here. I would never allow any of the children to break out into fights in my home. They were just not allowed to do that. And I always treated them with please and thank you. Please, would you do this for me? Thank you so much for doing that, And I'm not trying to brag about myself, but this was something that I learned because of my home life was so much the opposite,
Yeah.
And I thought, I'm never going to have a home like that, never. And so I really worked at that. And I always remember one time when Bernadette was my youngest girl, was a little one, about 2 or 3, and probably 3. And Mary Teresa was the older one. And she said to her, you go ahead and do that for Mommy. She makes you feel so good.
Oh.
I remember her telling it. And I thought it didn't take much, just that thank you and oh, how nice, that was so sweet, something like that.
Doing a chore for Mommy felt good because Mommy would affirm you and thank you for your effort.
Exactly. And the same thing with Henry and I. From the day we got married, every morning we pray together. Every morning we call good morning, sweetheart. Good morning, angel. How are you? We start every day like that. And I'm telling you, that's what kept our marriage. We still feel like teenagers when it comes to loving each other.
Wow.
We love each other very deeply, and we're not ashamed to show it. The kids get ashamed. Okay, Mom, TMI, that's enough.
I love it. I love it.
Well, Scott, you heard everything now. Jeez, there's no secrets from you.
Well, I love it. You've been so generous. But let me ask you now. It sounds to somebody just listening to your life right now like you don't have to do any work with spotting any longer. You don't have any anxious thoughts. And that's not true, is it?
No, that's not true. One of the things you learn in recovery is that there is a difference. There's nervous persons and nervous patients. Now, I was a nervous patient when I came into recovery because I attached danger to symptoms. If I had like a lowered feeling, I'd think I was going to have a depression and I'd work it up, go into all things. Or if I had a palpitation, I was sure I was going to have a heart attack, It would always be an extreme reaction. So you learn in recovery to have the symptom, but don't work it up. Don't make an issue of it. Drop it. Move on. Everyone has nervous symptoms. Everyone. I don't care who you are. You're going to go through anxiety. You're going to have fears at times, but don't make an issue of them. Learn how to let them run their course. Just leave them alone. Don't blow them up. Don't make an issue of them. But that's what recovery teaches me. I still have what we call in recovery. Dr. Lowe says, expect a setback. Everybody gets a setback. Everybody. And now the setbacks can be strong and long, or they can be short. It depends on me. How about I go back to the method and really start applying it again and getting serious down to the business of my mental health. Once I do that, I'm back on track again. I pulled in all the reins and I'm okay. And I move on, you know? So, I mean, sure, there's great periods when I feel really good and spontaneous, but there's also periods where I do forget. I don't watch my temper. I don't watch, different areas. And when I don't, I pay the price.
Yeah.
I get the setback.
But thank goodness you now have tools so that when you are paying the price, it doesn't mean that you've lost the anchor.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I go right back to the method.
As you look back over your life, one of the questions I like to ask people in this series of conversations we're having is, do you think there's a lot of folks who would look back over their life and realize, I think everything happened for a reason, and other people feel differently? What do you think about that? Did everything in your life happen for a reason?
Oh, definitely. I mean, it's not even so much a reason as it is a blessing. Like that. I remember at one point thinking, what good is this illness? When I was sick with my nerves. I mean, it was awful. I had these awful thoughts and everything. What good is this? But then God showed, and I remember sitting on the toilet, excuse me, and thinking, oh my God, why have you forsaken me?
Yes.
That's how I felt,
Yes.
But I look back on that and I say, look what recovery's done in my life. Look at the people that I was able to touch, not because of me, but because of my history and what God has done for me,
Oh.
And I never would have met Henry if I wasn't in recovery.
Yes.
It was only because of a recovery that I went to Chicago and met him. So, I mean, I see God's hand throughout my life. And my children, I had one son who needed the program when he was going to get married. He was getting anxiety actions about it. And I told him, I said, Tom, because I think he was even tossing up whether he should have a religious vocation or get married. And I said to him, Tom, this is not a religious problem. You have an anxiety problem. I said, come to my program for 3 months, and then after that, see what you think. He came and he made a total effort in it. And after 3 months, he was free of his anxiety, and he got married. And has, thank God, had a wonderful life with a beautiful woman and 2 beautiful kids.
Yeah, and they're the joy. They're such joy for you. So, I mean, this program really does allow things to happen that we could have. We really could get short-sighted and sidetracked if we don't stay open to what is possible.
Exactly. And to see God's hand. I recommend everybody make a timeline where they look at all the things in their life. Because, I mean, I'm not the only one that has these heartaches. People have them all the time.
Yeah. And
I thought if you can sit and make a timeline and then honestly look back and see God's intervention. Yeah. It's there. It really is there. You will find that after a certain period, something happened that was so beautiful, so special, that you can't believe it even now,
Well, why don't we do that even right now for those who are listening? Let's just take a moment of quiet and just ask ourselves, how has this conversation spoken directly to you and to your life? What blessing was given to you by listening to Joan's story? Where in your life are you in need of a shift that could allow for possibilities that right now are being thwarted by something that's interrupting what God has planned for you?
Right.
How beautiful to take a moment to savor this conversation and be grateful for it. Joan Spelter, you are a blessing in my life and in the lives of your clients and your family and this world. And I thank you for taking the time with me today. And I am praying for you to have a path ahead of endless joy and strength. And thank you for sharing it
God
with us.
bless you, Scott. Thank you for this opportunity to share my life. It made me so aware of God and the blessings that have been poured out on me, you know. And we don't always take time out for that, you know. And I just thank you for that opportunity.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for letting me bask in it. And for all of our listeners and to all of you out there, thank you for joining us. May God bless you all.